So I found this beautiful looking specialized Roubaix comp, and it had very minimal descriptions, but I knew exactly what this was, and I looked to spec. But here's the real question. If you found something like on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and it seemed like a good deal, well, let's see if it is a good deal. In addition to, what would it cost you to get this guy up and running after this? Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Obviously, I have a garage shop. Taking scary how to use bikes one bike at a time. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging with the guy. Hey, I'm Justin, the guy, and we're gonna check out this specialized Roubaix comp and see how much it would cost you if you saw this gem and decided to buy it yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of, mystery and what's gonna cost, that kind of thing when you're looking at used, and that's with everything, right? When you're talking about like buying a car on Craigslist or Facebook or on eBay to even a lawn chair. I mean, it's one of those things that, okay, there's an amount of risk to it to some level, but here I am trying to help you try to cut down that risk, or at least anticipation of knowing what is you're going to get yourself into, basically. And with bicycles, you can get into a hairy situation, but originally, when you're looking at any bike, and this is going to be a little sidebar, fit is the first thing you want to make sure you're looking for. Not necessarily the make and model. Yes, you may have one of those, like, I want this bike or that bike, but you want to make sure you do the research that you know the fit or the size that will fit you. So there's several different resources out there. Geometrygeeks.com is a great way to figure out geometries between different bikes. If you're already currently riding, if you're riding like a Trek and you like the geometry of that one, it works well for you, and you want to switch over to a different brand, you can do those brand comparisons by model year, which is kind of cool. If you're just a complete newbie and not sure, there's a lot of different resources out there, but size chart is usually the first way to go, and that you want to go by the actual brand if you can. There is Bicycling magazine has size charts as more of a rough reference, but when you're looking at like small, medium, large, compact frames and all that kind of thing, it can get really confusing pretty quick. So you want to make sure you dive into it knowing what size you're looking for. So if you see a giant out there and a specialized in a Trek, get those sizes down, like, okay, those three will fit me, then pull the trigger of contacting the seller and figure out a time you can go see the bike. I do have a top 5 list to check for, just to kind of get your head wrapped around what you're gonna might be looking into, as in costs and so forth. So definitely check out that video as well. But with this particular bike right here, it has a bent-in shifter, but the frame looks pretty good at a glance. The pictures, well, the guy had like one video and one picture. So if you're selling something, pictures, say 1,000 words, and that way you can do. But for me, with the eye of knowing this particular model and when they're actually new, worked in a shop, I knew it had pretty much most of the actually OEM parts on there. So it was a pretty good, basically a really good educated guess that this might be a pretty decent one. But that doesn't necessarily mean. I have a couple of these duds above me where the frames were compromised. I didn't see even after looking at the bike in person. So even the experts. But this one has a unique little tidbit that came with it, a water bottle. Treads Bicycle Outfitters, they used to be our competition. They're out of business too. Anyway, they just lost their crap a couple years ago, and they expanded and shrunk down and apparently got in trouble with Trek and what have you. So the parent owner, not the parent owner, but the company before that was called Destination Cyclery, which they're out too. So a lot to say. If you're looking at a particular shop and so forth, there's been quite a few kind of shakeups over the last couple of years. So you may not be able to find that original bike shop. Not that you need to do that, but just kind of one sidebar note, Anyway, let's dive into this, see what we got. So with all bikes, there's going to be a fit contact, right? Saddle may not be the right one for you. Bar tape's always good to replace. This one's always torn anyway, so that's kind of like a contact point with hands. People do a lot of sweating on there. Also, that can be added to give it comfort, as well as using cycling gloves, that kind of thing. And then this one has clipless pedals, and if you're not into clipless yet, you're going to have to get some platform pedals. With every bike, I suggest if you're buying used, if it's like an immaculate shape, okay, you could skip this part, but the cabling housing pretty much needs to be replaced. Reason being is that cabling housing is kind of rough over time, and since this has probably never been replaced, it's probably due. And this bike is probably about 15 years old, and what that's going to really help is the derailleurs to shift front. The shifter is going to work correctly through the cables and the housing for the derailleurs to be functional. Also getting better brake responding, which actually those still feel pretty good. But anyway, for the least of shifting and so forth, that's going to be a cost right out of the gate, that kind of thing. Then you dive into the wear parts: tires, chain, cassette. So I did take my little chain checker here and check the chain. I checked it in 3 different spots, and it's a little worn, but this is a Shimano chain, so they kind of come pre-stretched out of the box. Just a heads up on that. But SRAM chains don't. They're pretty snug on these fittings, so it's not too bad. I'll double check it after I clean it, but I think that's going to be the case. Doesn't look like the teeth have been worn hardly on this guy. So this has been garage worn. I mean, the brake pads have a lot of meat on them. The rim wells doesn't look like a lot of wear. The tires on these actually look like in still pretty good, decent condition. So those are some good things to look for. But you know, those costs of the cables, bar tape, pedals, and maybe a seat, you're at least looking into $100 if you're looking at labor to have that done. The tune-up that includes cables and housing replacement, it could be around $150 to $200, depending on your neck of the woods. So let's turn this and see what we got. So starting off, usually you want to take the wheels off, and that's where I start with, because the wheels are the third of your bike. You want to check and see if the hubs are smooth. Rim wells on these are just still shiny, almost new, as well as the tire. So I think that's in real good shape. Gonna dive into this rear wheel. Oh, smooth as well. This actually has Shimano wheels, which are pretty decent at the time. They are a little bit different to true, because the spoke nipples are actually in the hub, not in the rim. And you will need to have special spokes for direct pull on these. Well, pretty much all spokes are special. Don't want to exclude any spokes out there, but the reason I say that is they all come in different sizes. And there's 2 types mainly. There's the direct pull, like these are, which the head is not turned. Concept behind that is no bend or J-bend in the hook of the spoke, and that way there's no particular stress point. Direct pulls, they sometimes slide around in there, so it's a little bit harder to true. Whatever. You have to get the right size. Rear wheels have 2 different spoke lengths, longer on the non-drive, shorter on the drive, to accommodate that dishing of the rim. The front wheels are even on both sides. But so with wheel sets, you're looking at, usually it's 3 different spoke lengths. So if you ever want to get into wheel building or replacing your wheels or truing and replacing spokes and all that, that's some gold nuggets there. This still has its old plastic. So you can see how it kind of just snaps. That was pretty easy. This stuff gets brittle over time. I just take these off. They are supposed to prevent the chain going into the spokes. Yes, they have a purpose, but when they get to this level, if they break while you're riding, it's going to catch up in your rear drivetrain, which is actually more of a hazard than what it does as a prevention. If the rear derailleur is adjusted correctly, you do not need these guys. So we're going to throw that in there. Rear hub is looking pretty good. It's good. The cassette's just dirty. Still holding air pressure since I bought it, which is actually about 2 weeks ago. So, all right, let's see if this chain has a quick link. I have a sneaky suspicion it doesn't. The quick links didn't come out on Shimano's until recently. And if this is the original chain, we are definitely looking at needing to push the pin through. And since I do replace it with another quick link or power link, I try to find the original pin plate because I'll be replacing that hole with a interchangeable one. And pardon my time of going through. Oh, there it is. It's a little bit darker, one that doesn't look like the rest out of the whatever 140 links. Yeah, so push that out. What I'm talking here is when I push in, I put in a new quick link. This is supposed to be a 10-speed chain, so I'll be double checking that too. Because when you're looking at here, so I'll be replacing this whole plate, and since I'm pulling that old inserted pin in there for installation pin, now I'm replacing it with the whole portion there. So kind of a, you know, I would say a professional touch. That's what I'm looking for myself. So, all right, let's cut some cables. Since I'm going to be replacing these, I no qualms of just snipping these guys. If you have one on your own, you just have the cables and the housing done not too long ago, you want to make sure you can reuse the cables, especially if a piece of housing got boogered up. You know, these guys, you can, if you cut it clean or take the cable end off, you might be able to rethread it through and salvage your cable. And quite honestly, the cables themselves, they really don't wear out too much. They do have a bend point at the head, which is, let me show you where that is. And then sometimes that breaks inside the shifter, and what happens is it'll spread out. So if you're looking here, you'll see there's a nice little bend to it. Well, this is where, you know, the shifting is constantly pushing and pushing, pushing. And at some point, this will break and they'll thread, like, blow up inside there. And that's a nice little mess. But because you have to pick out all those little cable pieces out there, I go ahead and replace the housing. Sometimes I just swap them over to the next side and you get a new piece of cable on the other side, I mean cables. But I did notice on this one, I picked it up, the shifters were very lagging. In other words, there's kind of like that old manufacturing grease that was in there originally, and it's not doing its best anymore. So it needs to be cleaned out, and I'll take these shifters off. And by doing that, I'll put it in the ultrasonic cleaner with a little bit of degreaser in the mechanism. And that usually cleans out that old, come on. And that way you can get fresh lube in there. Oh, this guy's, oh boy. Now I got a mess going on. So now the little roller thing decided to pop off inside there. Oh, that got, ugh. Okay, when you replace brake cables on road bikes, you got to be careful. Oh, the mechanical ones anyway. Calipers. Disc, well, it depends on what kind of disc it is. There's this little guy here that fits inside the shifter brake lever. Just throw that away. Now, this little guy here has a little spacer and a little nylon shim, both sides. And if you lose this little guy or any of those little bits, it won't fit and you won't have a brake. And they're really hard to get back in, but for some reason they're really easy to pop out. I don't know, it's one of those weird things. You got to get it evenly inside there, so if you take a peek of that guy. But yeah, you don't want to lose those. This one's still in there. Take the brake cable. Try not to get those out, but sometimes they like to come out. And I keep an eye on those when I'm cleaning the shifter, because what happens is sometimes you'll get lost up in the tank and you're in trouble looking for that. Anywho, so what we're trying to do is get down to the frame and to see, is the frame okay? Reason being is that is basically a third of your bike and the most expensive part. And if there's something compromised on the frame that you bought that are used, you basically have a box of parts. So, and so let's be real here. When you're buying a used bike and it's a carbon, and yeah, the carbon may be damaged, and like, okay, I'll repair that. Well, just a simple repair is like $300-400. Let it sink in. Most of the bikes that you're buying used are $1,500 or less. So I don't think you want to buy a $500 bike and put another $400 or $500 into it just to fix the repair the frame. So make a good eye on that frame and make sure it's not been compromised. And by doing that, look it over. Take a clean rag with you if you can, and wipe down all the dirt. Make sure there's no cracks or any of that. And even then, it's not guaranteed, but you have a good chance. The ones I did miss, if I would have looked at them a little bit closer, a couple of them I would have caught. I was just distracted or whatever. No good excuse, but whatever. It still happened. So I still have to deal with it. Anyway, and there is really not a inexpensive carbon repair out there unless you want to dabble into yourself, and you want to be careful about that too. So yeah, there is a value match to that, and it's just expensive. If you want it done right, you're going to pay for it. So I'm looking at the jockey pulleys, making sure they're in good standing form. The derailleur has a little bit of scarring. When I say scarring, it has some scuffage here. So we got some little issues there we got to address on that guy. Let's take these bottle cages off. And they have specialized bottle cages which match, which is kind of cute. Red and black as well. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. And I do clean these bolts, and I double check the threads in the frame, because nobody wants to have to deal with retapping or replacing a bottle cage grommet. Those are two horrible things. And when I was a service manager and I had builders and we built hundreds of bikes, I would have my builders basically pull the screws out and put a little bit of grease on them and put them back in, just to give kind of a grease barrier of prevention, so you don't have any corrosive corroding going on there, because you know it's a water cage and it might get wet. And if you ride in the rain, it's definitely going to get wet. So I want to show you a little thing here. They used a Presto valve lock nuts to space out this bottle cage. And so if you look at the the derailleur, the band clamp is right on the back side. So instead of having this bow out and possibly break, they went ahead and bumped it out. That's the inexpensive version. It actually works just as good as anything else. There are actual spacers you can get. It's not really necessary, and it's underneath the bottle cage, so nobody's really going to see it. So there you go. All right, so we got this guy. This is a Ultegra front derailleur. It's a triple, which is a little bit longer. I did the video a couple weeks ago about front derailleurs, and this one is designed for a triple, and it's also designed for a compact frame or crank range. I'll double check that, make sure it works. Oh, the middle ring is smaller. Okay, yeah, so it should be fine. This is a 53 3930, so instead of like a 40 or 42 in the middle, it's a pretty good drop down there. So it's kind of interesting range, if you ask me, but it is OEM. I mean, I can tell that the chain rings are original to the FSA crank, and this is kind of cool crank. They're carbon arms. Does it really make it that much lighter? Maybe a little bit. Dropsies. Whoop. That's a spacer that goes underneath the underneath these to protect the contact of the pedal versus to the crank. And those are kind of good to have. I know you have one in there. Pop that out in a second. All right, let's get to this. So right now I'm loading up my sonic cleaner batch to start ultrasonic cleaning. I'm getting down to the frame here. The computer has no computer, it's just a harness. So we're gonna do the so satisfying of cutting zip ties. Yeah. I can't tell you how many of these I've installed and be able to just cut them off. So satisfying. So satisfying. Because, you know, you fuss for hours trying to get these things to look good. Technology has changed so much now that everything's wireless, number one. That's just great. And number two, nobody wants any of this old tech rigmarole. I mean, shoot, you can use your smartphone and do Map My Ride and do about 90% of the $30 computers out there just using your phone. So, and you should have your phone with you anyway a lot of times because, you know, especially if you're recreational riding, it's a safety thing. And get all this stuff off. There we go. All right. Cranksets. Let's check this guy out. All right. Hopefully there's no scary mysteries to unveil, because I definitely don't want that. I've had my fare this year, so I'd rather not have to take any more losses. But if I do, I do. Hopefully, this seems to be pretty good. Well, the crank anyway. It's nice and greased. Feels fairly smooth. We're going to inspect that later. And sometimes those little pedal washers I was talking about, my eyes are not deceiving me, it's still in there. Yeah, there's that guy there. So you just want to make sure you're going to put when I put the platform pedals, I mean, you won't put clipless on this with the platform. I'll make sure I put those on there. Those feel really smooth. Yeah, you're not feeling any grindingness or anything. So, got me some Purple Power. And then we're going to take a rag, Purple Power, blend 50-50 with water, put it in a bottle. And that is something I use to do the initial cleaning. And so what I'm doing now is I'm cleaning, but I'm also inspecting, making sure I am not coming across any damaged areas. Sometimes that dirt will hide damage, and that's where I got stuck on my first one. Is I thought it was dirt, kept on cleaning, and it turned out to be a crack, and it was underneath a brake caliper of an aluminum frame, and lo and behold, there it was. I'm taking this oh boy, you don't want to come out, do you? All right, we're gonna get this cable guide and goes through the frame, so, and it's kind of stuck in there. So what I'm gonna do is kind of give it a little push from the opposite side, because contaminants get in here, and yeah, that's something. All right, nothing too major, but definitely gonna clean this up a little and get it out and let it soak using some Bike Aid just to get that sleeve out, that kind of thing. Maybe I can use a very skinny tap. Let's try a tap and just tap the tap. Oh, come on. Yeah. right there. So that inserts through the frame, and as you can see, it's got some gunkiness, and that's where a lot of water and contaminants get sprayed up. And not necessarily it's a huge thing on the outside, but I want to pull it out, clean it with an ultrasonic cleaner, and after I'm done, take some grease or lube the inside here, which gives that barrier where the cable is rubbing up and down, so it's a little bit smoother. At least it gives you some water protection for a little while, that kind of thing. So there we go. Oh, on to cleaning. So chain stays are looking pretty good. Seat stays, nothing's catching. I had one frame once, is this model but smaller, and I was rubbing my hand across and I felt like a bulge in the carbon. I was like, what is going on here? Well, apparently they did such a good job of repairing the carbon, I didn't see it. I just seller and was like, hey, what's up? And you didn't say anything about this carbon, this frame being repaired. And it's like, I would like to know if you knew about this, and since you said you were the original owner, of course you knew about it, and it didn't specify that it was repaired. And I would like to know in a very nice way of where do you had it repaired at, so I can contact them and find out if they have any kind of record of it. So I don't know. I'm sorry. A lot of people are just, it was really kind of, why would you not specify that? I mean, I don't know. It is one of those weird things. Sure enough, it was repaired professionally, and it was stronger than the rest of the frame. So it's all good. And when I ended up selling the bike, I did disclose all of that, and it was checked and all that, and it's fine. So I'm looking at underneath scariness here. I'm not finding anything. It's actually shining up really nicely. Quite honestly. I think we have ourselves a gym. And after I do my little frame detailing, I should be able to get all this gunk out. And a lot of any little scratch. I mean, there's some chips where there's nothing you're just going to be able to do about that. I'm talking about like scratches and the general polishing of the frame. All right, this side looks good. Uh-oh. There we go. Let's dive into this side. Yeah. So, fat carbon from Specialized. That's what they use. Is their brand. It's nothing really too different, but what they've done is layering the carbon. When this came out back in the early in the 2000s, it was kind of a great process where they can actually layer the carbon by hand and actually get it stronger in areas and thin it where you don't. All right, yeah, I'm not feeling anything. Let's double check that bottom again. No scuffs, just nothing of concern. Chains, seat stays look good. A little bit of scuffage there, but that'll clean up. Oh, a little bit of scuffage there too. That might clean up. It doesn't look like it's damaged though. No fraying of carbon or rag's not catching on anything, which is a good sign. And down tube. I got a little interesting chip right here. Okay. All right. All right. Uh-oh. I have to get a new one of these. All right. I think we're good. Frame and fork is good. I'll inspect the wheels when I clean them and trim them. I'll inspect the parts when I clean them with this ultrasonic cleaner and get them all laid out. But other than that, at least I know the frame is not damaged or compromised at this point. Granted, I do the detailing, which puts me in the position of looking the frame over another 2-3 more times. And let's just keep diving into this and see what we get. Check out these cleaned out parts. All right, let's take a look. Ooh, the chain, cassette, all clean. Brakes and derailleurs, all functional. These little boogers were gummed up. They would not shift before I did the ultrasonic cleaner. And when I did, sprayed out the old grease and redid it, they are definitely shifting now really well. So those are going to be a magical return. And these guys, just the caked on grease that had to be peeled off, but the teeth, you can still see the machining from when they were being made. So that's actually turned out really well. The wheels were true, hardly even been used. So that's a good win. And the final, oh, look how beautiful this frame came out. Granted, it still does have a couple of its little chips, that kind of thing. But other than that, though, the rest of the paint on it is just immaculate and polished up really well. So let's recap after this. Well, here we have it. Got some good parts. They seem to be in pretty good order. The tires are good, actually. The tubes are holding. The wheels are great. The frame is fine. Shifters are going to come out. So actually, this turned out to be a pretty good find. Although, if it was you still would have needed to have the tune-up done to get those shifters, and that probably would include a drivetrain clean with ultrasonic clean with a particular shop that does that kind of service. That really brings those shifters back to life because it melts that old grease out. Because the ultrasonic cleaner is a higher temperature liquid that really breaks down that old stuff, and actually you can replenish it with light lube. That works well. I usually use the Tri-Flow lube for all the pivots and so forth, and also the shifters, and that usually brings everything back to life for sure. So what would this cost you? Well, cables and housing, pedals, we'll not do the seat because the seat's there, and just the actual tune-up is probably what you really would have had to pay for most for. That particular tune-up packages from most shops, $150 to $250, let's say $250 just to be safe. And cables and housing, sometimes they include that, but let's say another $50, $40-50 for the cables and housing. So I would say topping out even the more expensive areas around $300. That does kind of sound a little high. You may have done some of the work yourself, that kind of thing. It definitely would have gotten us to, pretty good shape, maybe with a shop that has lesser price, but let's just say $300. And the cost of the bike that I got it, definitely going to be a solid bike, under $1,000 for somebody to get into road riding and that kind of thing. What can you say? Full carbon with Ultegra 105 componentry, carbon cranksets with Shimano wheels. No bueno. I mean, it's awesome. There's a couple little scuffs here, but honestly, this is a gem. And check out these beautiful pictures after this. Jeez. One of those days. Me. Welcome back to Annoy Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hey, I'm Justin the Guy. We're going to check out what this would cost you if you bought this off of the internet, Craigslist Marketplace, Facebook, or Craigslist. Nah.